Hello, thank you for joining me, astrologer Patrick Arundel, for your Saturn special report. Saturn moves on the 6th of October into a new home in Scorpio, where it will reside for the next 30 months. It's been in Libra for the last 2.5 years, so I wanted to try to grapple with this and try to explain to you, try to demystify some of the aura of the influence of this planet, because people often do talk about it in apocalyptic terms, and it is a very important influence. It's the planet which controls structure. It's very much to do with orthodox. It's to do with sweating us, making sure that we really are doing our best in any given situation. But it's pretty unrelenting is its influence, and that's why it probably gets a bad reputation. Now, a lot of people have been writing to me in recent months saying, I can't wait until Saturn leaves Libra. But unfortunately, the naked truth is that wherever Saturn is, it's still going to be active. It doesn't stop being active. It's active all through our lives. And I want you to think about your life in general and think that it's probably been divided up into lots of sections of 7, 14, 21 and 28. The cycle, the total cycle of Saturn, where it gets back to where it begins, is 28 years. So if you think about relationships that, that faded out after 13.5 years, or that job that I really liked, I kind of just grew out of it after 21 years. Or is the 7-year itch an actual factor? Well, all these things are fascinating. And very often when I see big changes going on, big personalities decide to do something different, it's quite amazing how often it does fit the Saturn cycle. But what about you? If you've had personal planets located in Libra, not just your Sun, or you've had important locations such as your midheaven or ascendant in Libra, then you will have known about its impact over the last 30 months, that's for sure. And over the last 10 months, Saturn has been working its way through the part of Libra, the third decan, which is ruled by Mercury. And this has concentrated our thinking. And if you think about it, when you put Saturn and Mercury together, it can make us feel a little bit worrisome, a little bit more negative, and not so optimistic about prospects. So when we think about the financial markets, and Saturn certainly has an influence on those, well, there hasn't been an awful lot of joy knocking around over the last 10 months, has there? And in fact, if we go back longer than that, the correction started to occur when Saturn moved into the very precise influence of Virgo and Pluto moved into Capricorn. And the just go for it, live in the moment influence of Sagittarius that Pluto passed through. Well, over the last 3.5 years, we've seen a very, very different message about really tightening down the battens, being much more disciplined about managing our finances. And it hasn't been easy. And there are some citizens in the world, such as in the Western world, such as in Greece, who are really finding it very difficult indeed. Of course, there is a wider world, and there are many citizens who don't even have it that bad. They have it much, much worse. So we must be very mindful about how we talk about this planet and how it affects us in our individual situations. So it moves in 7-year cycles, and it moves through each sign in 2.5-year cycles. It goes through 3 retrogrades during those 2.5 years. And it's now going to enter Scorpio. So what does this mean? Well, the first decan of Scorpio is ruled by Pluto, one of the 2 co-rulers or co-regents of Scorpio, if you like, the guiding influences of that sign. Now, Scorpio has a pretty grim reputation in some ways of being cunning, cold, very intense, passionate, very pushing and demanding. But you know, that actually comes from the first third of the influence of this sign, ruled by Pluto. The picture changes in the last 20 degrees, but we can say in the first 10 months, well, things are definitely going to be very, very intense around the financial markets. I don't think there's any doubt about that at all. And we're all going to have to get used to perhaps being much more disciplined and perhaps letting go of some expectations that we had when it really was a buy now, think about it later situation not so very many years ago. And that whole boom fueled the downturn that we now have. And for many of us who work in very, very straightforward jobs where, yes, even astrology, where you have to put in the hours and a lot of hard work and perspiration, it seems so unfair that in the wider world there are people who seem to risk and speculate and bet on derivatives and all the rest of it that cause us real suffering. Well, the great news about the influence of Saturn connecting with Pluto in Scorpio in this first 10 months is there's going to be lots of revelations. And if there has been corruption, if there has been things done that hasn't been for the wider good of personkind, lots of things are going to be stripped open and made bare. Now, of course, for the people that this reveals, and it's already starting with bankers starting to be fined, banned from activity. We've had, even in recent months, an awful lot of news in terms of the LIBOR rigging around the rates for the wholesale lending rate of money that's occurred. And all these things are really going to be scrutinised very, very strongly. And for us ordinary folks, we're probably going to be quite cheerful about it. But unfortunately, it will affect us at all as well. So pensions may not be very plentiful. Unfortunately, savings won't give a great return. And it's all about restriction. It's all about hard work. A lot of intensity. Now, this intensity can also come out in degree of power, but power in different ways. So if there has been corruption of any kind, even reading in the paper the other day, apparently there's a lot of corruption in China. Apparently the leaders there earn £25,000 or about $35,000 a year, and yet they're sending their children to absolute top universities like Harvard and Yale in the States. How do they afford to do it? Well, apparently corruption is rife. And the secrecy that's existed in China, in Libya, in Syria, and to a degree in Egypt, and all this change that's gone on through the Arab Spring, all of this is going to come to a point now where it starts to really chaff. It's not necessarily going to be easy. I saw one astrologer talk about when Uranus entered Aries, that it was really going to free up a lot of freedom. I thought that was incredibly naive. Yes, it will create freedom, but we have to remember that Uranus is a very much impulsive planet, and if you put it in an impulsive sign like Aries, it can cause chaos, particularly when it continues to square with Pluto. And there is also, of course, at the very last day of September, and providing a backdrop into the early days of October, there is a very potent full moon which sees a T-square forged between the Sun in Libra, Aries full moon, Uranus conjunct to that full moon, squaring up to Pluto. So a lot of the energy that's been building up is that we have freedom, but freedom has consequences, such as the American ambassador being killed in Libya so tragically. And this is because people are given freedom that they've not had before, and they may not be used to it. So the power, the passion, the revelation that's going to come through with Saturn moving into Scorpio is something you need to brace yourself for. Now, if you're someone who's determined to improve your lot, how can you turn Saturn to your advantage? I've told you about the more negative context, but what about the more positive one? Well, if you're really serious about paying down debts, getting into the habit of trying to put a little bit of money away, however hard it might be for your future, investing in a pension if you have a little bit more money, about living more frugally, being much more conscious of what you put in your system, not just having so much takeaway food or ready food, cooking things from scratch. All these things can be helped by Saturn in this location. And if also you want to make provision for the future, thinking of your dependents, taking out life insurance, anything to do with long-term financial and monetary and business management can be aided by Saturn in Scorpio. But as ever, what happens with Saturn is it seems to take away things. Why does it do this? Well, what it really does is it takes away things that are no longer truly right for us. And it helps us to strip our lives down to a more simple, more basic and essential part of ourselves. So, for example, if you're a Libran, You may have started 2.5 years ago having potentially more friends, apparently, than you seem to have now. But I would suggest the friends you have now are the ones who are really worth having. And that's what Saturn does. It helps us to get real. It helps us to get down to the nitty-gritty, the things that are really productive, to get rid of all the bits and pieces that don't really count. We're not talking now about things that are airy-fairy and notional. We're talking about things that are real. That means paying the rent, paying the mortgage, making sure we live within our means. And I do think that the world, as it's been struggling with this huge debt crisis where governments have continued to live beyond their means, and as individuals we've done that as well, then the message is clear. We all have to continue to get used to living on less, to living in a more simple way. And those people who tend to swan around in the world not paying their taxes, evading paying their way, their fair share, they're going to come under fantastic scrutiny as well. Believe me, this is going to reach, the tentacles of this will reach into those people just about more than anyone else. And some of the ways that this can happen might be surprising. It's not just because there's some grumpy tax collector there. They're actually trying to balance the books for all the services that are so important to ordinary people like you and I, such as paying for hospitals and libraries and schools and road construction. So if people are evading tax, well, the upside is that Scorpio has an exaltation, and that is Uranus. This planet, the planet of the unexpected, kind of gets on well in Scorpio. It's not there at the moment, but we can see that software and new technology will be used to hunt down people like this. And also new technology can be a way that we can all secure our futures, so we can reach out more to other people. It doesn't just have to be that we're working locally and we get to know the people in the next street. We need to connect with people who really understand what we're trying to do. So if you're feeling productive, you want to achieve things, you want to manage your finances more effectively, and you also want to feel that other people are as well, this can be a very, very exciting time. So we mustn't see Saturn only in very grim, awful, derogatory, nasty terms, even though it can be really hard work if you have it on your natal planets when you were born, or it's going to pass over key personal planets or positions as it moves through Scorpio. It's been a pleasure being with you. Thank you for taking the time to join me. Good luck, and I'll be updating you on the exact aspects that Saturn in Scorpio will be making all through the coming months, and goodbye for now.